You're listening to NTParanormal After Dark. Nothing normal about it.
What is up, muggles? Welcome back to another episode of Stupid People Explaining Smart Things to You that you can probably figure out for yourself, starring me. No, I'm just kidding. Man, we have a good topic today, and unfortunately, I'm doing it solo because everybody else has other stuff to do, or they think that they are not smart enough to talk about quantum mechanics, but, you know, that's a thing. I'm not really smart enough to talk about quantum mechanics, but I'm going to give it a shot. So this whole episode is going to come with a warning. I'm going to get crap wrong. I am not a astrophysicist. And mostly I'm just really good at like mechanical engineering and math and stuff, which gives me kind of a little bit of a leg up on it, and I kind of understand what I'm talking about. But if you go and fact check every little thing I say, you're going to catch me on something. And I totally want you guys to do that. I don't want to spread misinformation, but I'm going to do my best, right? Because our topic today is so freaking cool. It's one of my favorite topics, actually, and it's started even before we got into like the paranormal field or anything like that. I just love sci-fi and sci-fi movies, and so it's something that's got a lot of popularity lately, and I'm not really sure why. I really think it has something to do with social media, modern media, the rise. Anybody can make a video and post it now. Any idiot like me can have a podcast. So just a lot of stuff gets out there, but I get a lot of questions, a lot of emails. We had a lot of discussions this week kind of leading up to it, did a ton of research. God, I was just trying to go over the show notes, to kind of get my ducks in a row before talking to you guys, and I just about gave myself a migraine trying to really wrap my head around how a Rosenberg bridge works. So I've got my work cut out for me. I'm pretty sure the show's probably going to run long. I'm going to try to answer every single question, and if you guys know more about something, say so. I want to debate it with you guys kind of live, because, I mean, this is a really, open discussion. So we are talking about time travel, and not just well, obviously time travel is theoretical at this point, but we're not just talking about what's addressed in science fiction. We're talking about the practical applications, like the science that has really been put into it by people way smarter than me. Kat, I'm not surprised they don't feel they know enough about this. Not any of their expertise, nor mine, nor anyone know but you. Well, it's not my, thanks, Kat, but it's not my expertise either. I have not invented a time machine. I have not claimed to travel through time, although that would be pretty friggin' sweet. I think everybody has an opinion on time travel, and kind of like I said with the rise of social media and all that, but just movies, like time travel, anybody that's seen a movie in the past 20 years has been exposed to tons of ideas about time travel, how time travel works. Comedies, serious movies on the subject. It's, it really, really picked up steam with H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. But I mean, more modern people like us, hey Tammy, how's it going? Picked up on it with just Back to the Future, Marty McFly. And, so everybody's got this concept of time being this fourth dimension that we travel through, and always forwards. You have the first three dimensions, which are height, width, and depth, and then time is always kind of considered a fourth dimension. Well, modern day physicists don't really subscribe. That's something that was put forth, by science fiction, by H.G. Wells, proposing it as a fourth dimension, which does make sense, because but time is kind of a construct. It's something that we have created as a measurement tool in our own lives to kind of give meaning for that passage of time, and it's all based on solar cycles. The Earth spins around, the Earth orbits around the sun to make a solar year, and then the galaxy or the solar system travels around the galaxy, and you have galactic year, you have galactic time, and it's different. And it's a weird concept for people to pick up on when you really start to break it down, right? And there's just like a lot of, I got my cool little graphic going. There's just a lot of misconceptions about how time actually functions. I think if you ask anybody on the street, about time and relativity, they'll tell you that time is relative because they've heard it. But I don't know that they actually understand it. Like, we all know E equals MC squared. We all know about relativity. People are pretty kind of knowledgeable at a common level about quantum physics. Anybody can pick up a book or watch a documentary and kind of learn about this stuff, but does it really sink in? I don't think people really get into like what the math actually means. They kind of get lost in the science fiction of it all. So I kind of wanted to talk about it and untangle that a little bit, or as much as I can, as somebody that's not a astrophysicist, if that's even possible. So when we're talking about time travel, let's be clear what we're talking about. We are always traveling through time. Like, as I talk, as we live our lives, you are always moving forward in time. Every second ticks by. So forward time travel is obviously possible. What we're talking about is moving through time at an unnatural rate. And the thing about time travel is, surprisingly enough, forward time travel is actually covered under general relativity. And you don't even have to break into special relativity and quantum physics for forward time travel. There are conditions that we know of where you can travel forward in time at an unnatural rate. Now, whether or not those conditions can be met, like on our planet, it's almost impossible for these things to happen except in extreme circumstances. And that involves actually getting off of our planet, moving at different speeds and gravity variances, which we'll get into like a lot of that science here in a minute. The really, really tricky part when we're talking about unnatural time travel is going to be backwards. And that's the big thing. Is it possible to move backwards through time? And even though the answer is it's likely no, the science actually backs up that it is physically possible. Now, whether or not a person could do it or not, it is what's going to be up for the debate. But moving backwards in time, there are actually allowances in what we know about physics to allow for this. Now, some of it is in general relativity. A lot of it's going to get into quantum physics and special relativity, and you're going to have to meet certain conditions which are basically not humanly possible, but they can happen. And that's when you start talking about things like faster than light travel, things like that. Let me read some time is relative to the person perceiving it. That's all I know. Mondays last 4 days and the week lasts 4 hours equals MC squared is beyond me. Okay, and we'll get into that too, because E equals MC squared is actually very, very relative. No pun intended. It's very relative to the conversation of time travel, and orbital cycles and how gravity actually functions, because the very interesting thing about how time functions that I don't think a lot of people understand is that time is not necessarily connected to this ambiguous notion of moving through time. Time is very, very hand in hand with gravity. You actually can't have one without the other. And gravity is the main building block of how our universe operates. It's as we get into the discussion, what you're going to find out is gravity is the main factor that keeps you from being able to travel back and forth through time unnaturally, and it's also the force that's going to make it happen. It's kind of like a double swinging door, and as much as I like to think I'm super smart, as I dove into a lot of this stuff and I got into I always had a concept of how time travel could work, just as like a writer, as like a fiction writer. But as I got into the math of it and really started understanding it, it blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, people get paid to come up with this crap, and it was totally awesome. So just to be clear, when we're talking about time travel, what we're talking about is unnaturally moving forward through time, unnaturally moving backward through time. So moving forward through time unnaturally would be time speeds up, but you don't age, so you can basically jump ahead. And there's ways you can kind of accomplish this without breaking the laws of physics. There's ways around that. So like if you can suspend the body in like suspended animation, I mean, I'm sure that's an easy one, right? We're very, very close to being able. I think we can actually do that now, but you can basically like freeze somebody and they wake up 90 years later, and so you've traveled forward in time. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about warping space-time so that you're alive, you're conscious while it's happening, and you skip forward. And then the same with backwards. You're warping space-time in a way that allows you to go back along your own or alternate timeline. So these are the things we're talking about. And oh my God, this stuff's going to get wacky because you get into multiple universe theory and different timelines, and oh my God, it's going to get nuts. So let's talk about the science behind time travel. So deep space having no gravity has no time. Actually, Kat, there is time, but time moves at a different rate of speed. There's a difference between Earth time, solar time, deep space time, and galactic time. And it moves at different speeds. And as we're talking about it, there's an experiment I'll bring up where they take like an atomic clock and they leave it on the surface of the planet, and they take an atomic clock and they put it in the space station. They constantly have to reset them. And as I'm talking about the science of it, we'll see if you guys can figure out it. Okay, so I kind of already given away that if they have to keep resetting the clocks that are in orbit on GPS and things like that, obviously time is moving either slower or faster. So as I talk about the science of how gravity affects time, I'm going to pause and see if you guys can figure out, would the clock on the space station be ahead of the clocks on Earth if we didn't reset them, or would they be behind? Would they move slower or faster? So it's going to get nuts. And then the further away from the original source of gravity you get, time gets even loopier. And then the pieces of mass you have in there, it gets nuts because gravity affects space-time and how fast time operates and moves. So, all right, I already see some guesses that it would be slower. We'll see. We'll get into it. You might be right. You might be wrong. Who knows? Okay, so the concept of time travel. By the way, I did research that's not on Wikipedia for a change. I went and pulled up like notes, like Hawking's notes and stuff, and tried to like water that crap down. Anyway, so time travel, it's a concept of movement between certain points in time. It's analog movement between different points in space by an object or a person, typically using a hypothetical device known as time machine. The concept of time machine was actually popularized by H.G. Wells with his book, The Time Machine. Before that, no one was really thinking of like devices that you could get in to move through time. There were like biblical stories from different religions and stuff of people that had moved through time, but it was always through some sort of allegory, like religious story or whatever, where God had like moved them around, things like that. And then H.G. Wells came along. There was one guy before him wrote another story, but it wasn't super popular, like nobody knows about it. And then H.G. Wells came along and totally popularized the idea of a time machine, and B, how one would move through time, where we get this concept of I always stay stationary in my bubble, and then I cease to actually move through the known three dimensions, and then I move through only through the fourth dimension, so that I appear in the exact same place that I would be, only forward or backward in time, right? And then this, in reality, this poses a lot of problems, actually. If you move through time, you're also going to have to move through the other three dimensions with latitude, longitude, altitude, or else you're going to end up in a really funky place like outer space, because of reasons, that's something we're also going to touch on. I always hear them folding time like a piece of paper. This is like a plain sheet you fold over to move through time. Yeah, okay, so the movie you're talking about, I think, is Event Horizon, and I really like their concept of time travel, where they're not folding time, they are folding space, which space, gravity, space-time, it's all related. They fold space. What happens is they end up forming a Rosenberg bridge, and then that actually allows them to move between dimensional space, and then when they come back, because of time dilation, they have moved forward and then subsequently backward through time. So the science is about to get really nuts, because it's all theoretical physics, which is kind of my bread and butter, things I like, but, I'm not an expert. So here's the funny thing. Here's the officialness from the science journals, right? It's uncertain if time travel to the past is physically possible. Forward time travel outside the usual sense of perception of time is an extensively observed phenomenon and well understood within the framework of special relativity and general relativity. However, making one body advance or delay more than a few milliseconds compared to another body is not feasible with current technology. So basically what they're saying is the math does allow for forward time travel. If we're breaking down forward time travel, the math allows for it. And there are known instances where it can be observed in nature. Like it's a natural phenomenon that happens where things can move faster through time, and that's kind of what I was talking about with the clocks. But where we're able to observe it as humans, it's in milliseconds. I was typing that question when you said it would appear in outer space. Yes, and I'll get into that because that's kind of like one of my huge revelation talking point things. Equations and math graphics, kinda, sort of. You're not going to need so much the math, but I do have super snazzy graphics coming up as we talk about time travelers and some of the locational problems that you're going to run into. So anyway, let me get to, I had a note here. So forward time travel it's a phenomenon we observe, and it typically happens with things like time dilation, and where that science actually comes up is going to be related a lot to black hole singularities and areas where time-space is distorted because of nearby mass. The closest thing like that to us on Earth is going to be Jupiter and our own sun. They are so massive, and it's not just the size. When you think of mass, you have to think of density of mass, right? So if the densest thing in the universe is a black hole or a supermassive black hole, you have to remember that it was bigger as a star, and then that star collapsed into basically nothing, like something the size of an atom at one point. But it kept its total mass. So it still has the gravity of a star, something the size of a star, but it's condensed into something incredibly tiny, and then it spreads over time. Also, traveling through time would only be half the problem. The planet is not only... I'll get into that in a minute. Spoiler warning. Barely understand the words. Sorry, I'm trying to break it down, dude. I'm trying to get through some of the science, so I'm legit before I start really just blasting some of this stuff. So forward time is observed. Some backwards time travel is theoretically observed in things there's a theoretical particle known as the tachyon particle. It's never been proven to actually exist, but it's so small you wouldn't see it. But the thing is so you have atoms, you have neutrons, electrons, you have all these things like swirling around, right? So a tachyon particle in theory would be similar to this, right? But the theory is that the tachyon particle actually vibrates so fast that it moves faster than the speed of light. And when you get into the laws of relativity, anything moving faster than the speed of light would appear to be moving backwards through time. As you approach the speed of light, things dilate, but as you cross that threshold, suddenly physics start to work different because you're breaking one of those regular physics laws, and then you get into special relativity. Tachyon particles move faster than the speed of light. So if you were observing a tachyon particle moving around, it would always appear to be moving backwards. Okay? This is one of the things that's kind of essential to some of the ideas on how realistic time travel would actually work. These would be, and the only way a particle can move faster than light would be if a particle had a negative atomic mass, or some kind of element had a negative atomic mass, which means that not only does it doesn't just have zero gravitational pull or gravitational effect on space-time, which I'm going to kind of show how that functions in a minute, but it has a negative effect on it, so it would actually be moving backwards, not forwards. So that's a totally weird thing that they're kind of talking about. Some theories, most notably special and general relativity, suggest that suitable geometries of space-time or specific types of motion in space might allow time travel into the past and future if these geometries or motions were possible. In technical papers, physicists discuss the possibility of closed time-like curves, which are world lines that form closed loops in space-time, allowing objects to return to their own past. That's where you end up with these like weird paradoxes and rules and things where if somebody comes back in time, they could alter it, and then they could end up creating a paradox closing this loop where like it's the grandfather paradox. And if you watch Futurama, Fry's his own granddad. Right? So the past can't exist without the future. You end up with these paradoxes, and then nature just totally falls apart. And these are things that science fiction has really driven home for people, and that's kind of one of the main reasons that human time travel, at the very least, is considered completely implausible, because we would, if it was possible at any point in the future where we traveled back due to the butterfly effect, we would have destroyed our own universe, right, already. And the only way you survive that is with like a multiple universe theory, where every time you alter something, it creates an alternate timeline and leaves the original timeline intact, and then you have an infinite number of universes, right? Hawking was he really loved the idea of time travel, but the way he saw it is it just totally wasn't possible. And he had problems with the causality and all that, and he proposed a theory that even if time travel was possible, basically the laws of nature would correct it, like everything would correct itself in its own way. So even if you went back and you did something stupid like kill your own parent, so that you could never be born, so that you would never be able to travel back and cause one of those paradoxes, the timeline would find a way to correct itself. And there are various scenarios where that happens. So something like dark matter, antimatter. Yes, except antimatter will still have atomic weight. The only difference is that it's a negative charge. So the only thing that would exist within antimatter, it would still have an atomic mass of 0 to infinity, only it would be negative matter. So it still exists. It still has the same weight and mass. It's just a polar opposite. Just like you have your North Pole and South Pole. The South Pole is just as strong as the North Pole. It's just the opposite. You could actually change if you change the magnetism in a compass, it would point south just as strongly as it would point north if you change it to repel rather than to attract. So without getting too technical in it, kind of like antimatter in the fact that it's opposite or negative. Negative matter would probably be a better description than antimatter. But you are on the right track. Dark matter also has mass, because dark matter, we can't directly observe it in space, but we know there is dark matter in space that has a gravitational pull. To have a gravitational pull, you have to have mass. So we know that dark matter can have an atomic mass assigned to it. So it's something that physically exists, but it might be dark, right? So yeah, I know it's a little complicated, and I only barely have a grasp on it. I'm not trying to mansplain this. I just telling you what I know about it. You can do your own research, right? Okay, so ways that we can naturally time travel without a time machine, although you might need a capsule or something. One of the things that exists in general relativity all the way through special relativity, like deep embedded in quantum physics, is going to be wormholes. Wormholes are created by distortions in the gravitational field. It's so strong that it basically makes an entry point and an exit point. And when you pass through it, not only are you basically folding space, like Kat said earlier, but the gravitational pull is so strong that time is going to dilate, because gravity has such an effect on time. Man, I know I pulled up a diagram of this, and let me look it up real quick. Oh my gosh, no. Don't mention me in a comment. What are you doing? Okay, so check out this little graphic here. So apparently I did my slideshow out of order is what it is. I had planned on talking about this a little bit later. So in getting really excited about all my notes, I actually did my show completely out of order. I was going to talk about time travelers first, I guess. So time-space, think of it like a grid or like a mat, right? And if there's nothing that has mass anywhere around, it's just going to lay flat, and everything's just going to move at a normal pace, right? Something that has mass is going to kind of dip into that bit of time-space, and as things move around it, like closer and closer to it, it's going to move faster and faster. As it gets further and further out from a gravitational source, it's going to move slower. So the best concept of this is seriously Planet of the Apes. I hate to say it, but they rocket like straight out, right? And they leave Earth's gravitational pull, and they go further and they go further out. And I believe in the original script they were supposed to go to Alpha Centauri or whatever, but they get like so far and they hit a return trajectory course, and once they get back to Earth, they're in the future. Well, it's because as they get out, time moves slower and slower for them, but time on Earth continues to move faster and faster. So when they get back, it's like 500 years later, or whatever it is in the script. We can't see dark matter, hence being dark, but we have been able to observe its gravitational effects. Like Ashton said, black holes, even still, there is much more gravitational influence in the void than there is matter to account for. Yeah, that is correct. It's more so like black holes are an anomaly. They are these big gravitational vortexes, and like this little grid that I'm showing right here, right? So it shows the Earth, and it makes like this natural dip. So if you take the Earth out of that picture, but you leave that dip in there because there's something the size of a chickpea sitting in that little dip, then you kind of get an idea how a black hole works. It still has the mass and the density of something larger, but it's tiny. And so we don't understand how that works. Dark matter, which exists in all that blank space between planets, galaxies, black holes, all that, still exert gravitational force on things. Not as extreme as a black hole, but we can see light bend, or we constantly have to readjust the trajectory of our satellites. Like Hubble is a big one. This is one of the ways we've really actually been able to observe not observe dark matter, but observe the effects of whatever it is out in space that we call dark matter. There is just gravitational force or gravitational waves out there that aren't pinpointed as having a source, and this is attributed to dark matter. And we've kind of thrown around the idea that we could travel, if we could harness that, then we would have like we could make like a dark matter drive, a gravitational drive that would allow us to kind of move freely around the galaxy using dark matter, because since it's always there, you'd basically be able to scoop it up with the front of your ship and kind of shoot it out of the back, just in kind of layman's terms. Apparently that's how alien propulsion systems work. No, I'm going to tell you how alien propulsion systems work here in a minute, because it's part of my presentation. Actually, let's get back to that. So we'll talk even more about the science, right? Let's talk about people who have claimed to travel through time. And over the years, it's got bigger and bigger. Like, the claims have got more frequent, more outlandish. People have come back from the future with video evidence. When I'm talking to people that I've seen a bunch of like time travel videos, or been talking about people, they're like, hey, what do you think of this guy? Do you think this guy's story's legit? You know, these people that have kind of gone viral. There's some big names that pop up immediately when you're talking about these. One of the first ones that people that believe time travel has happened, one of the first names that pop up is this Andrew Carlson guy, right? So it's kind of this like really weird story. So apparently there was this dude, and he had like no ID on him. Nobody knew who he was. And when the police caught him, they couldn't identify him, and he just kind of disappeared, right? But what this dude did is he went into the stock market one day, like just boop, walk in, right? And he had his card and everything. But he started with just $800. By the end of the day, he had amassed like, oh shoot, I'm going to get the number wrong, but it was like $500 million, because every single stock that he invested in just grew and he invested perfectly, flawlessly, right? And so by the end of the day, he was picked up by the feds for insider trading, right? And so they're grilling him and they're putting him in interrogation. His story was, no, I'm not an inside trader. I'm from the future. Right, and he had he gave him details about the future, some future events that were going to happen. He gave him details about a time machine, how the time machine worked, things like that. But he wouldn't take him to the time machine because it was too dangerous. And the story was initially, and so here's where it gets kooky and kind of falls apart. Right, here's kind of some of the schematics for his time machine, which don't really detail anything. They got all the words blurred out. I think this is just like I think they just took the schematic part of it and then made like an artistic rendition of it. And you can kind of see it in this picture here, right? So the story was originally broke by Weekly World News. I know, super, super credible. But there was so much like truth kind of mixed into the story that it became national news. Like Washington Post picked it up. Like all these different credible news sources just kind of spread it around. $350 million off the stock market in just 2 weeks. Okay, so I did misquote that, but I think a lot of it was made in just like one day. But they ended up picking him up. I don't know why I didn't look at that when I was saying it earlier, but the story spread around, and the details of what he was saying about his time travel was supposed to be super, super credible, but they couldn't warn us about it. Yeah, no, I wish he would have warned us about the Kardashians, but there were parts of the story that like meshed up or whatever. So anyway, supposedly the dude just like disappeared off the face of the planet. And but if you really dig into it, like really, really look at it, like there's all these news stories, and all the news stories that were printing it as credible news, and that's kind of where everybody goes, oh no, this was a credible thing, because all these different Weekly World News was the very first to report on it, and all the details seem to kind of come from there and a local source. And so it was kind of this like hoax, and the deal is Andrew Carlson, it probably wasn't a liar. He probably never existed in the first place. There's no records. There's no records of him. There's no records of the arrest. There's really no records of those stock trades going down. So a lot of people that point to this as their kind of, oh no, there could be people from the future traveling back and exploiting our system. Kind of point to that one as like one of their smoking guns, and that one is like one of the more easy ones to debunk, because you go back and there's just really no records and then you look at the designs, and I mean they've got the picture going on here of him in the time machine, which doesn't match up with the story that he wouldn't show him where the time machine was and stuff. So there's a lot of inconsistencies, and it all kind of goes back to this like tabloid gossip thing. So it's like one of those examples of, you get kind of like the conspiracy guys that just have really, it's not that they're stupid, they just have really bad sources. And it's just this kind of repeat of information that makes this like urban legend thing. Okay. The next big one, and this is the huge one, and you guys can Google it. Like if you Google real life time travelers, this is probably the first name that will actually come up, and that's John Titor, right? Now, John Titor was it was a national story. It's like a well-known thing, but it was really super low-key, and that's what kind of made the whole thing believable. And even reading it now, like there's a lot of it that's kind of debunked, but there's so much kind of like weirdness involved in the whole story that even mostly I think it's a load of bull, just kind of like this viral marketing thing to make money. But there's some really interesting kind of factual stuff in here, right? So let me pull up my notes so I don't get any of this wrong. So John Titor's name just like magically during 2001 just started showing up on bulletin boards and posters claiming to be an American military time traveler from the year 2036. He made numerous vague and specific predictions regarding calamitous events in 2004 and beyond, including nuclear war, which none came true. Subsequent closer examinations of Titor's assertions provoked widespread skepticism, inconsistencies in his explanations, the uniform inaccuracy of his predictions, and there was a private investigator that looked into it and kind of figured out some of the hoaxness to it. But the thing is some of the ways that he kind of pre-explained away some of the like inaccurate predictions were kind of genius at the time, because he was talking about some like mathematical theorems and stuff that weren't just really common knowledge at the time. They hadn't really they hadn't really been written in scientific journals. So if the dude was hoaxing, he was actually a really intelligent person, right? So the symbol I've got showing up here, this is supposedly the he said he was with the time traveling military, right? And he said time travel was actually invented by GE in a like around 2003 or something like that, and he was from 2036 and he had traveled back. And the story was so weird. And he had posted on a bunch of like forums under an alias. He had faxed Art Bell at the time, and his story is that he actually came back in time to get what's the model of this? He needed an IBM 5100 computer, which was at the time a legacy computer even then. Now it's like ancient freaking history, right? But he said that his granddad had actually invented this computer, and he gave out some specifications and things that this computer could do that weren't common knowledge to the general public. It was never advertised as being able to do that. It was super old. But he said the framework of something going on in 2036 was based off of this machine, so he had to come back in time to get this computer so he could go forward in time to go debug this problem that's coming up, right? The other thing that was really, really interesting is he gave, like the other guy, he gave out specifications for how his time machine worked. Which was really odd because this wasn't just like some kind of mystery claim. Like, you can go and find the schematics for this, because he basically scanned copies of this time machine user manual from his point in time. And the way the mechanics and everything lined up made like a lot of sense, because it used a magnetic drive, and one of the really important factors in it was, with all the discussions going on at the time, the drive, the description of it was actually basically like an anti-gravity drive. What it did was it changed gravity. It was basically designed as like a zero gravity machine, but what they found out is that without the hindrance of gravity at all, it would actually bend space-time and allow them to move backwards and forwards. It gets a little goofy because the story is he had it installed in the back of like a Ford Taurus or something goofy. It's like a Chevy Cavalier or something. But he uploaded all these pictures and things like that, and he had schematics about how time actually works. And this went on for like a long time, and a lot of the people online just it was super, super credible. But that's when you get into somebody that's really digging around, and this private investigator kind of gets involved with it. They basically find out that John Teeter's probably, just like an alias, and they trace like IPs where he's posting, things like that. And it comes back to this like property lawyer that's he's basically running like some kind of weird money scam in Florida. But it kind of fizzles out from there because there's no like criminal activity the way it's working, and they can't actually directly link it to anything. And the John Teeter guy just kind of stopped, and nobody ever claimed credit since or whatever. And he made all these predictions about basically like a World War III, and the United States was going to be split into like 3 main colonies. Like, it was all this wacky stuff. But he had explained at the time that time does not work in a linear fashion. Personal timelines are not a thing. The drive and time travel actually worked off of the multiverse theory, that as you travel through time and you move and you start to manipulate it, it starts to create separate, instead of like overlapping timelines, where like if you go back and change something, now the future's different. What happens is it creates parallel timelines, and then it splits further and further and makes all these trees. And he said, yeah, all these things happened in my timeline, and my timeline shouldn't be too different from the one I just jumped into, but these are the things that happen. But if they don't happen, it still fits into that multiverse theory. And so it's very plausible in the way that it leaves an out. And also what's great about that multiverse theory is that you can't accidentally kill your own granddad. It just creates a separate thing. And then supposedly when this guy goes back to the future, whatever, he's jumping into another, he's not going back to his original timeline. He's going to another timeline where none of that stuff existed. And it just gets crazy and like gives you a migraine trying to think about it. But if you're interested in stories about real life time travelers, look up John Teeter and all the stuff that goes with it. And it's most definitely like some kind of really elaborate like money making hoax, but the way it's put together is just so genius. And I think they even made a movie about it. So one of the and those are the two main ones that the time traveler people bring up. But the really good one is, I lost my notes on Bob Lazar. So Bob Lazar, right, supposedly worked at Area 51. Sounds like a king. Actually, he wrote a time traveling novel, which would be the one where they try to go back and prevent the Kennedy assassination. Langoliers. That's a good one, but it's a really horrible, like, made-for-TV movie. I wish they would actually make that into a better movie. I like the Langoliers. So Bob Lazar is somebody that kind of just popped up out of nowhere, right? And he claimed to have worked at Area... And now, this is before anybody knew Area 51 was a thing. Like, he pointed to the actual location where Area 51 was, over by Groom Lake, talked about various things that lent a lot of credibility to lead people to believe that he actually did work there. He claimed to be... He claimed to be a scientist that worked at Area 51, reverse engineering alien technology, specifically UFOs, to make a new kind of gravitational drive, right? He claimed to have degrees from MIT and another school. But when people tried to like go back and look at his educational credits, there's no record that he ever went to those schools. And he claimed that this was done by the government to kind of like discredit him and you know, make it so nobody would listen to him because he was basically breaking an NDA. November's 1969, I think. Yeah. Yeah, it's where they... Yeah, Carlos, it's where they go back to, you know, unkill Kennedy, and things go bad. They made a TV show about it with James Franco here recently. So Bob Lazar just kind of came out of the woodwork and just turned everything on its head because he had a lot of details about Area 51, like he had been inside, and he had a lot of details about the military-industrial complex and all these experimental things that were going on at Groom Lake. And he said that he was the scientist that was in charge of reverse engineering the UFOs that had basically like crash landed, had been recovered, and he was going through. And basically what he was saying is the way that the drives work is they would function off of this element called element 115. It's now named Moscovian, but it was called unpentium, which is 115. And at the time, that element had not been created or discovered, declassified, anything like that. Like it at the time they were talking about, it did not exist on the periodic table. It does now. So that's where things get really weird because he's talking about the properties of element 115 at the time. And he was saying that it actually had properties to it that could warp or bend space-time to make faster than light travel possible and hyperspeed possible because things that were using this as an element in their energy source did not actually have to travel from point A to point B. It actually stayed stationary and warped space-time. So at the time, element 115 was not a thing. It hadn't been created yet. This is a synthetic radioactive element, and 115 is the atomic weight of it is very heavy. It's one of the heaviest elements, top 5 heaviest elements actually. It's man-made, and as far as we know, not according to Bob Lazar, but in like reality for a second here. Let's pretend Bob Lazar doesn't exist. We've only made 5 atoms of it, right? You have to make it with a hadron collider, and the only 5 atoms of it, they're just for like experimentation purposes to see how the world works. But during those experiments, we actually made 5 new elements to add to the periodic table. So it's really, God, it's so crazy that somebody in the late 70s, early 80s just comes out, or I'm sorry, I think it was the early 90s, just comes out and starts talking about this thing that isn't even out yet. And he's actually talking about, when he goes into the math and the things like that, he talks about the actual properties that later, when element 115 was created, in like what we know about it, kind of matched up, which is crazy nuts. Now, that doesn't actually mean that his story is completely true. It just means he was able to educate himself enough to figure this out. So is our current element 115 the same element that, yeah, see, that's what I'm kind of explaining. There are different properties. It doesn't match up exactly, but a lot of the things with his math and what he was talking about with element 115 were right on the money. And that's so crazy to say. Because Bob Lazar ended up being like badly discredited. He probably never worked at Area 51. The guy was basically bankrupt at the time. Like, it was this big kind of story, and it kind of, the way it all unfolded, it was another one of those kind of like money making schemes. The guy is obviously very, very well educated, but when you go back and look, the story that he was weaving kind of fell apart, right? So all the element 115 stuff, apparently those atoms were unstable and degraded really fast. Yeah, and that was one of the things that he was talking about, that it was unstable and would and degrade really fast. So the drive he was talking about would perpetually create it, and since the mass is so heavy on it, that was supposedly what warped space-time. The E115 was supposedly the stable version of it. Yes. Oh, well, kind of, sort of. Like, when you get it, if you really look into it, he made a more stable version of it, but it could, like, self-perpetuate itself, which is kind of nuts, because you would have to have alien technology to do that, because it breaks the first law of thermodynamics, which is not being able to create energy from nothing, right? You would be getting into alchemy at that point. Thermodynamics says that you can't destroy energy and you can't create energy. Everything kind of like is secular. It comes from something, right? But when you get into the guy's personal life, like the whole story part, not the science part of it, but the story part of it really suffers and falls apart. So the guy was down on he was totally broke. He needed money. All this stuff kind of came to light. He owned like a company where he basically sold like UFO hunting equipment, like Geiger counters and telescopes and things like that. And then later on, the dude was arrested for he was installing cameras in a bordello that he owned in Arizona, I think, or whatever. He ended up getting a restraining order from his own bordello, where like he turned out to be kind of like this like weird sort of sleazy guy or whatever. But you still have these like weird kind of things that line up, and it's like, because a lot of the information that he had seemed to be based on legitimate classified information. And given when like they looked at his education and stuff, like, okay, so there were no college records, and maybe the military expunged those, right? Even though the school said, look, this is entirely not impossible, because the guy didn't show up in any yearbooks, no one remembered him. None of the teachers from those years remembered him. He couldn't even remember what year he got his master's in engineering or whatever. Like, it was real sketchy. And then they went back to like his high school transcripts where he did his SATs, and they were really low, or not really low, but like really just average, or like C, like he made like C pluses, right? which is fine. You can get into college with C++, but not MIT doesn't usually take anybody that's not the top of their class. Like, they would have to present some kind of project to get in, things like that. And they just had no records of him, and none of his early school transcripts really showed that he would even be eligible for those sort of things. And the only record of college he ever took was like some like very basic science courses that he took in night school. So it was really sketchy, like where this guy kind of came from. And there was really nothing to indicate other than the presentation of the element 115. And it was really hard, and it was, I don't know, maybe it was easier to swallow before we learned more about element 115 in reality, because, you know, it was all kind of made up at that point. It's like, oh, that's really cool. And then we learn about Moscovium, and not everything lines up. Like, it is something that could possibly be used as a fuel source, because it's in that same elemental weight as plutonium, and it's highly radioactive. But it would be considered a synthetic, like heavy metal sort of thing. So it's not really something that would readily make fuel, and it definitely does not show the properties of being so heavy that it warps space-time around it. At least that information hasn't yet been released. So that's one of those, it's just one of those really cool things where go look it up. Like, I can't even begin to get into in depth about how awesome all those stories are, even though they're probably all hoaxes. But some of those are really cool. And there's another one, I didn't get any graphics for it or whatever, but there's another one that popped up a bunch that somebody, and I didn't get the message early enough to actually include it, but there's a new guy out there that's time traveler, and he goes by Noah, and his face is all blurred out. You can look him up on YouTube, time traveler Noah. Supposedly he went to the future, took video of the future, brought it back, played it for us. Super legit. I watched it. The very first thing I was thinking, I was like, why is that on a Samsung 6? You know, like, why is the phone not from the future? You know, it's like, why did he go forward in time, take this video on the, like, why didn't he just bring something back or something? Like, it's so sketchy and really kind of hokey to me, but that's another big one. Schizophrenia, like the teacher in the, oh, I need to go back here a little bit. What does something like that degrade into? Probably something radioactive, and I mean, yeah, to be sure, it becomes unstable and doesn't become an it, just because it becomes its raw element, not element, it becomes raw atoms again. The warping of space-time apparently could only be done if the element was atomically stacked and cut very specific ways to be used as the fuel. Right, but the technology to be able to do that, I mean, think about it this way, that element has to be created with a hadron collider. You're talking about a molecular structure that is so small, how, other than splitting the atoms by smashing them, there's really no way to do exactly what he was kind of saying before. In a lot of his diagrams and thing in the math doesn't line up with it, not from the mass of it. Okay, that is interesting, because maybe I do get what you're saying, and I get what the science is behind that. He's saying the mass isn't changing, so if you cut it, the mass stays the same. So what it's doing is it's actually creating a bigger gravitational pull. The problem is there's just no science to support that can actually be done. Let me rephrase that for all the conspiracy people there that want to bag on me. There is no released science that shows that can actually be done. I don't know. And it's not outlandish to say that the government isn't experimenting with time travel. That would be a thing that every government is probably... I mean, we experimented with space travel like 10 years before we told anybody we were experimenting with space travel. So why not time travel? And I mean, we did MK Ultra. So, you know, government, They do those things. But anyway, it's very, very, very scientific. That's what he said. The element doesn't exist on Earth, and our tech can't make it. Oh, well, then we've directly proved him wrong, because we have made element 115 with a hadron collider, specifically. So, yeah. But, I mean, the guy was mostly discredited. So, I don't know. Go look into it. Like, go look the guy up. Look what he has to say. It's freaking interesting. But just take everything with a grain of salt, and remember that not everything lines up. Just because there's a lot of numbers on the screen doesn't necessarily mean that they're right. So where was I going from there? I already kind of talked about tachyon particles. Energy is equal to the relative mass, speed of light. Oh, okay. Just for fun, I'm going to explain what E equals mc squared actually means. So, energy, E, is equal to relative mass, that would be m, times the speed of light, which is c squared. And basically what that's saying is energy is equal to the mass of an object, which is, it's basically saying that gravity is energy. Gravity equals energy, and it's the most raw form of energy, kinetic energy too. Not a stable version. I'll have to look at it more, some backstory. But his latest documentary was really good. Yeah, I mean, all that stuff on Bob Lazar, it's so interesting. And another guy to look up, it's really, if you're going to go down that rabbit hole, I can't remember the dude's name, but look up the bass player from, he was an astrophysicist for a while. He came missing, and they think he was abducted by aliens. What is the name of that? Iron Butterfly. The bassist from Iron Butterfly came up missing because he quit the band. It's the band that did Anagata Vita, right? He came up missing one day. He was working for the government as an astrophysicist after he quit Iron Butterfly, and apparently had some like weird messages that people were coming after him. It gets like, the story's just like really super freaking crazy, right? Turn this off for a second. So, Blink 183. No, but you mean Blink 182, and that's Tom DeLonge, and that guy thinks UFOs are a thing, and he's sadly probably one of the most credible UFO researchers out there. I hate to say that Tom DeLonge is the most credible UFO researcher out there. Am I streaming again? Sorry. I cut out for a minute. Geddy Lee. No, he's just a fan of Ayn Rand. Geddy Lee's the bass player for Rush. I'm talking about Iron Butterfly. Sadly, I'm right about Tom. It's so weird, but that's just one of those things where money equals access. Because he's this silly like punk rock guitarist, and the dude's probably like half, he's probably had a concussion at some point. But he's got a lot of money, and his passion was UFOs, so he gained a lot of access to people that had access, and now he's apparently knows a bunch of classified information because he's like friends with people that ran the original Project Blue Book now. So yeah, he is probably one of the most credible UFO researchers out there, and has at least 5 #1 hits about like sharding his pants. That's just, kind of how it goes. Okay, so how does space-time work, right? E equals mc squared, and that is basically what I was talking about before. Energy can be translated to gravity. Gravity is energy. Energy is gravity. Okay, just kind of get that through your thick, meaty heads, people. Okay. Mass has an effect on energy. The greater the mass, the more energy that is present, right? So we're talking about this like big space-time grid. Damn, I wish I had downloaded the really cool video that MIT did. So they basically stretch like a big piece of latex over like the top of a swimming pool, right? And then they would drop like a heavy object in it, and it would kind of look like the Earth, right? And then what they would do is they would take marbles and kind of like throw it out there in an orbit, and then it kind of like circles around, right? And that's how orbits are kind of created in attraction. And then they could put like a big thing on this side and a big thing on this side, and the objects would be attracted to the bigger object because it would make the bigger dip in space-time. So that's kind of the only way to visually represent that. Nick Redfern is the delusional and research delusional people. I have no idea what you guys are talking about anymore. I'm gonna stick with space-time for now because that's complicated enough. Right? So big objects create more gravity, which creates more attraction, which creates which causes more gravity slows things down, right? So the fastest thing that can move in our universe is considered to be light. Because light has photons have zero mass, or one mass, I think. And no, photons have atomic weight but have no actual mass. So they move mostly unhindered, but gravity still affects them. So as light moves by bigger objects that have bigger mass than them, light bends, right, and slows down, and that's what makes them able to be seen. Because if light was able to move unhindered, it would be moving backwards through time. And so we're getting into these like really weird concepts that are like really hard to explain. So I'm just going to throw out a bunch of like crazy facts that are going to make your mind explode. First of all, unless you're a flat earther, and if you are, just sign out, because you're not going to like anything. I don't know how you've watched this far if you're a flat earther, but so this is going to piss off the round earthers. You have been taught your entire lives that the earth orbits the sun. I'll give you like a couple of seconds to say, do you think that's correct? Does the earth orbit the sun? Let's do all the planets in our solar system orbit the sun. It seems like pretty common knowledge, right? What do you guys think? Right? The answer is no. The planets, the Earth, they don't orbit the sun. Earth does not revolve around the sun. Planets and sun are orbiting the center of mass of the solar system, in which the sun has the tightest orbit. So people think of the Earth or the sun is being in the center and totally static. That's actually not true. The sun is actually also in orbit around a very, 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 very tiny thing near it that is creating a center of mass that all the things are attracted to. And it just has the tightest, fastest orbit. What does the sun orbit? It is just a mass. It is described as a mass. It is within the sun. It's within its plume, but it is whatever the mass is on that spot. And so it travels in the tightest orbit faster, and then everything else travels around that in wider orbits, and then they also spin, and that is how you get what we perceive as the passage of time, because it's just a concept. So here's where it like breaks down. So on this, let's start small, relatively small, right? We have the Earth. Yay, right? And it spins at 1,600 kilometers per hour, right? So while you're sitting here thinking you're stationary, there's nothing on my desk flying around, I'm not having to hold on. We're actually traveling at it's 1,000 miles per hour, You're moving at 1,000 miles per hour. Everything is moving at 1,000 miles per hour right now, and it's just freaking spinning. But everything seems stationary because movement and time are relative to the observer, right? And Einstein showed this by that logic, the Earth don't rotate; it orbits a gravity field in the core. Yeah, you are correct. That is absolutely correct. I'm glad somebody's on the same page as me. Okay, anyway, so we're spinning, right? Like spinners on a Cadillac. That's stupid. Anyway, but because everything's, since everything's moving at the same speed, we don't perceive it because we're moving at the same rate of speed as the landmass that we're sitting on, and blah 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 blah. And actually at our poles, it's actually moving at a slower rate of speed faster rate of speed slower rate of speed because it is a tighter orbit. So it's kind of funny. So even in the smallness of our own planet, we have to have time zones and we have to adjust clocks, because if you put clocks near the poles and then you put the same clock, even though it's in the same time zone on the Earth, they're going to move at different rates of speed, right? Time is going to pass slightly differently. It gets even more nuts when you get mind blown. Lies of the cosmic slot. It's true. It's so weird, and I'm just throwing technicalities at you. I mean, it's not really that mind blowing. It blew my mind though when I was looking up, how to calculate orbits, and it's like the Earth does not revolve around this. Like the main headline for it or whatever was Earth orbiting giant mass, blah blah blah, does not orbit the sun. I was like, what the F is happening? But so because of relative motion, we don't perceive anything as moving, and that's very, very important because once we get to another planet, right, you have all these awesome planets in our solar system. Oh, look, I can point to things, right? And so here's Mercury, Venus, Earth, there's us. You get to the very next planet out here, which is Mars, right? It has a different gravitational field. It's a slightly smaller planet. It does not have the same gravitational pull because it doesn't have the same mass as Earth, right? So we're lighter there. The other thing that's really weird is time moves a little bit faster there. Did I say that right? Is it faster or is it slower? I'm screwing up. I lost my note on it. Time functions at a different pace. I am pretty damn sure time moves slightly slower on Mars than it does on Earth. Because of the distance from Earth. Because since time is relative to where you're from, if you're setting up your own clock there, time would actually move at a faster rate. But since it's relative to the gravitational pull of its origin, it moves slower because you're further out. So it gets a little bit nuts, and that's just in the family of our own solar system. The further out you get, the more time dilation that you actually experience. The other thing that has to be considered is not only the pull of the closest body that you're close to, all the objects in the universe exert a gravitational pull on every other thing in the universe, okay? So closer to gravity, more gravity, time moves faster, and vice versa. Yes, that is correct. Closer to gravity, more gravity, time moves faster. And yes, like water going down the drain. As it gets closer to the drain and goes down, it spins. And then in Australia, it spins the other way because it goes backwards in time. That's science. Absolutely, that is science, I'm sure. Okay, so I'm rambling on. I'm explaining all this very, very badly. So the further away out into space you get, time starts moving differently. The closer you get to things like black holes or things that have very, very large centers of mass, especially the closer to the center of our own galaxy you get, you start to experience time dilation. This is actually something that we can calculate. So I'm not, and it sounds like I'm getting really, really off track. How does this all factor into time travel, right? So you have to change your perception of what you expect time travel to be. It's not moving just forward or backward in a timeline. When you're traveling through time, you are also traveling through space, because space-time has to follow along with the physicality of what you're doing. Stationary time travel absolutely 100% cannot exist. And this is what you're all used to in science fiction. When you see Back to the Future, and he's driving and then he hits another time, he's in the same place, but it's another time. That can't happen. And that's what happens in every single concept of time travel, but you can't do that. You have, and we were talking about it a little bit earlier, and some of the quicker guys kind of caught on to it, but you have to also calculate your latitude, your longitude, your altitude, as well as your movement through the timeline. And the reason is because if the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour, and it's also rotating around the sun, right? It's going woo around here, and the sun's spinning around, and then you get all the way to our galaxy, and we're right here in the galaxy. And I don't think people realize that our entire solar system makes us a galaxy cycle around here, right? And that's 828,000 kilometers per hour. And it takes 230 million years to make an entire galaxy cycle. And by the way, those are galaxy years, and yes, it does matter because it's a different measurement of time. It's slower than our time. So it's like 5 times the amount of Earth cycles that you would normally think. That's why time moves faster by milliseconds when you stand near Great Pyramids compared to more distant observers. Here's the deal, Amelia, you can do this even if you have a 2-story house. If you put someone upstairs in your house and someone downstairs and you both have atomic clocks, it's so much more minuscule. But technically, the person upstairs is aging slower than the person downstairs by we're talking milliseconds here. When you get up to the space station, it gets a little bit more drastic. If we go to Mars, we're going to have to calculate that out, because then it's going to be like 4 and 5 seconds, right? And so when they're trying to calculate those orbits and things like that, that's why a lot of the one of the landers at Mars, they calculated it wrong, and it had a lot to do with, first off, one of them crashed because they calculated it in standard, not meters or whatever. They got it backwards, whatever it was, and they just buried the fucking lander. But then another one screwed up because they got the time differentials wrong. But that's what you kind of run into. Have you played Quantum Break? Great game, amazing time machine. No, I'll have to check that game out. Anyway, so we move around in the universe. The other thing you have to factor in is the universe, and at all points, because it's homogeneous, also expands. So what this actually means is that there is no place in the universe that is ever in the same place at a later point in time. We are always spinning, we are always moving, and we are always moving ever outward and going out. So if I try to say I'm going to be even if I'm sitting in this chair talking to you guys at the same exact time tomorrow, physically in space-time, in that big grid, the only thing that actually matters, I'm not in the same place. I feel like I'm in the same place because it's relative to my position and everything moves with me, but we're not. You're never in the same place for more than a millisecond at a time, right? So if you only traveled through time, if I suddenly warped forward in time, even just a minute, it would completely take me out of that 1,000-mile-per-hour revolution, and I would probably appear in Australia, right? And that's not a real math problem, guys. Somebody could probably calculate where I would pop up. It would probably be in the core of the planet or something stupid. But you get what I'm saying. You have to also move through space as you move through time, or you're just going to end up in space, like, period, and die. That's why humans moving through time is very precarious and probably can't work. But on Mars, you're in a completely different gravitational field, so time would be calculated completely differently. Yeah, that is correct. And I mean, even not just talking arbitrarily, like, I mean, Mars has different solar cycle, like a day is going to last a different amount of time. But as an astronaut, you're probably still calculating everything on Earth time. Or I think they would do it by sols, but like if you're trying to sync yourself to Earth time, time would be passing, but you would find out that it doesn't quite sync up. Neil deGrasse Tyson, he actually explained it in great detail, and one of the great things about the movie, The Martian, is all like 90% of the science in that movie was like dead on accurate, and that's one of the things that was a big deal. There's another really good movie called Interstellar that did a great job with dealing with how time dilation works, because they actually go to a planet that's circling a black hole and they think it's viable, but they get on that planet and weird stuff goes down, and they think they've only been down there they have only been down there like 4 or 5 hours, but when they get back to their space station, which is further away from that planet, which is further away from that black hole, like 20 years had passed for the person that was still on there, because relative time kind of kicks in. Isn't that why they couldn't make transport from planet to planet? Hell yeah, that would really screw stuff up. I don't even know how you would do that. And like you get into this weird theory, right? So you have to think of things in relative terms. So one of the problems with, if you think about falling into a black hole, you would never make it, and you would never be perceived as making it, because some part of your body is going to be closer to it than another part of your body. So like if you were flying at it like Superman, like your fingers would get to the black hole before your hand got to the black hole, before your elbow got to the thing, all that. And so you kind of like stretch out, but because of the way space-time works, what actually happens is you're actually going to perceive yourself as just being suspended in time. Well, really your body's going to be like crushed and put in like condensed to a single atom, but that's a completely different thing. And so since time is relative to the person that is perceiving it, that person would appear to forever be going to the event horizon, right? And it's these weird concepts that kind of debunk whether or not time travel could actually be a thing, but the math does actually exist there. So it gets totally nuts. So the human body could probably not survive. To be able to travel through time, you're either going to have to increase gravity to the point of a black hole, or decrease gravity to the point that mass can travel faster than light, which the human body can't survive that. That's why you need a time machine or some kind of vessel that can protect you from that, and then your body would be moving in relative motion to that machine. So going off what you said about the time dilation in Interstellar, what would happen if those two locations were in constant communication in some way? They would constantly be out of sync, just in the way... Yes, you would, and Julie said you would never catch up to yourself. Exactly. Okay, so it's a real thought experiment, because this isn't something we can do, but we can see how it works, like when we sent people to the moon, or we've sent people into orbit, right? So the communication is completely out of sync. We send a message, and it takes an enormously laggy amount of time for stuff to come back, and it's not just the distance that the signal has to travel, it's because time is like slightly different, so everything's off by a few milliseconds. If you had a magical way to communicate at both ends where the distance had nothing to do with the lag, where it was instantaneous, so you would say something and they would receive the message, but here's the thing, the message would sound really slowed down to them because they're moving at a faster rate of speed, right? And I'm moving at a slower rate of speed. So even though everything sounds normal here, at their end, it would take them a week. That's a great example of it. Okay, so if it takes me, say the time dilation is a week for every second, right? And I speak one word a second. And I send you a 5-word message like, get the hell out of there, right? Yeah, because outa is one word. You like that? It would take them 5 weeks to listen to that whole message. It would take 1 week for them to hear the word get the, right? And it would be stretched out. And what they would have to do is compress that, listen to it at their speed, and then they would send a message back like, hey, we're not going to do it, right? But then we would get it back. And so it would be compressed. It would be the opposite problem. It would sound like it was super. We would have to slow it down because it would be so fast. So it's relative time, and it really screws stuff up. And so when you travel through time, you're not only traveling through that timeline, you're traveling through that gravity well, which means you're also going to pass through other things that have an effect on that gravity. And so you're never, if you could travel through time, you will never ever sync up to where it is you're trying to travel to. When the time machine and quantum break takes place, and to consider when time traveling, they make a circular tunnel with 2 exits. Walk through the tunnel clockwise, travel forward, and counterclockwise, go back. But you will come out of the machine on the other side, so you did travel through time, but also space to get there. This sounds pretty awesome, actually. I'm going to have to check that out. And you know what I like about modern technology? Like, we're taking things like video games and making them, like, hyper scientifically realistic, or at least plausible. You know, our science fiction is getting so highbrow and researched that things get to like a plausible level. I already went through all that. That was just my rant about nothing in the universe is actually stationary. Yeah, I'm just kind of ranting at this point, I guess. I don't know if I've made any kind of points or any kind of sense to you guys at all. Gravity is the key to time travel, and how we perceive it. Time is not just this arbitrary thing that's passive. It's something that's constantly changing. It's not how normal people think of it. And then it kind of gives you this like existential crisis when you realize how it's working, because it's not something that you're just like kind of passively going through. It's constantly changing and being manipulated, but you can't see these changes. You can't see the manipulation because time is relative to our perception of it. There are places in the universe where time is moving faster and slower than what it is here. And in like that example I was just giving, where trying to communicate at 2 different points, there is no middle ground to it. What we say to the point where time is moving faster, we sound just completely weird if there's that much dilation. And the closer you get to like black holes or eddies or anything like that, you run into those problems. If Jupiter was a solid planet, I mean, it still has the mass that it warps with. But if, say, we put a colony on one of Jupiter's planets, first off, we have to deal with the fact that Jupiter's gravity is so strong that it would crush our freaking bodies. So we have to figure out a way around that first. But if, say, we somehow figure out how to do a colony on Jupiter's moon, right, and normalize gravity, the sending messages there, it would be that exact same problem. Maybe not to that degree. Like 1 second would equal. That would throw it off really bad there. So I think the rough math on it is like 1 second would equal 10 seconds there. So if you're communicating from Earth to Jupiter, and we take out the entire problem of how fast radio signals travel, right? all our words are going to have to be they're going to have to play everything we say at like a 10-second faster pace, right? And then they have to take the time to do all that and then send it back. And then by the time it gets back to us, it's going to be at 10 times normal speed for us, even though it's not for them. And we'll have to slow it down to understand it. And even just that like little 10-second dilation in time screws everything up. Does time ever stop? The answer to that would be you would have to have zero mass, which does not exist. Time is either going to move forwards or it's going to move backwards, and that's where you get into negative mass particles, which are not proven to exist. We've theorized them, but there is no proof that there's anything that has a negative mass. But there are allowances into special relativity that could make a negative mass object work. And I was talking about tachyons. So that would be one of the things that could possibly, if tachyons could be proved to exist, which there's no proof that they do. This is a theoretical particle, right? But you could transmit using tachyon particles, and since they move faster than light, they are not subject to time dilation. You could even send messages and data backward in time. So we were talking about if you move forwards or backwards in time, you're dealing with these like massive amounts of gravity distortion, which your body's not going to be able to survive realistically. But if you're talking about data is a different story completely. Imagine if you could, so maybe you can't physically go forward in time or go backward in time, but what if you could send data forward or backward in time? That would be a drastic change, and it would be as good as physical time travel, because if you could send messages unnaturally forward in time, like, I mean, you can send messages forward in time by writing it down and leaving it there, and they find it in 1,000 years. But if you could transmit instantly to a point forward in time, and they could instantly transmit back, then that opens up a lot of possibilities, and it's thought that tachyon particles could actually do something like that. So, I mean, to kind of snowball, kind of put it all together, it's real weird saying this, but time travel is plausible when you take away all the fictional aspects that have been proposed there, right? And this isn't coming from somebody that's like just buys into like stupid concepts. The thing is like if you strip away the idea that, okay, I can just travel like in my DeLorean and show up in Hill Valley of the future, and you start kind of stripping that away, and you start focusing more on, okay, can gravitational fields be purposely manipulated? Well, the answer to that is, I mean, maybe not now, but inevitably, yes. At one time we thought we couldn't harness the power of electricity, right? But we bend electricity to our will every day. We bend radio waves to our will. It's just not like I'm talking to you through the internet, using Wi-Fi. We have the ability to do these things. And so it's not a stretch to think that we can't also manipulate gravity in a way somehow using some different forms of energy manipulation. And I didn't put these up here, so I'm just going to show these to the camera and hope this works. So you start getting into these really cool equations, right? So you can kind of screen cap that if you're really curious later. What these equations are showing, and what's weird is a lot of people's concept of time travel is based on like magnetic propulsion systems and things like that, and you're like, well, how does that actually affect gravity? And by creating these like antimatter fields, we've actually shown that we can not cancel them out, but to a degree negate a lot of gravitational problems, and within those fields, it creates small pockets of time dilation. So we're already able to do this on a very, very small scale, and it's not for the purpose of time travel. It's for other different experiments, but it's kind of those building blocks that gets us there. Okay, we have received broadcasts from the past that have gone into space and been reflected back. How does that fit in all this? Well, that's not a time travel thing. That is actually just radio waves bouncing back and receiving the old broadcast. But I mean, even the way our vision works is affected by the way time-space works, right? So the farthest points we can see out into the universe with like radio telescopes gets blocked out. But the thing is at the speed that light travels and bounces back, the images, I'm sure all you guys know, I mean, if you're listening to this, then, you know, you're probably a fan of science, but you know that like half the stars you're looking at aren't even there anymore. We're just now receiving the light because it takes so long for it to get to us. So by the time we actually see a star dying or like snuff out, it's actually not happening like in real time. This is something that's unfolding into our past. So the further out into the universe that we look, the further into our past we're actually looking at, which is a totally crazy thing to think about, right? So when people are talking about how the universe evolved and things like that, with that, even though time is relative, so there's going to be a certain point we're never going to see past like what's on the other side of our universal bubble sort of thing. And you get in all these like really weird concepts that are hard to explain, and you know, then you're just gonna like completely lose your faith in reality and try to unplug from the matrix. So but I don't know, I'm really curious like what y'all's concepts are, if you guys have some interesting things to kind of throw back at me, because I feel like I skipped around a whole lot, or maybe I didn't explain something good. Like in my head it all makes sense, man. I just don't know how to verbalize it. Gravity is like totally the key to everything. Gravity is like the rawest form of potential and kinetic energy, but gravity is always exerting a force on everything. And when you get past the concepts of trying to physically move forward and backward through time, and you start thinking about things like data, other waves of energy, things that can carry information moving forward and backward through time, we're actually a lot closer to these things than people actually think. Because so we were talking about how the space station's clock, if you take an atomic clock and you leave it on the surface of the planet, you take an atomic clock and you put it up into the space station, the atomic clock up there is actually faster by a few milliseconds, because they're further away from slower by a few seconds, because they're actually further away from the gravitational source, right? So every time we're communicating with them, we're having to resync our communications, and when they communicate with us, they're communicating with future us by a few milliseconds. But it's really weird because we basically have to communicate through a little bit of time dilation to make things sync up correctly. It's even possible to experiment with transmitting data through time, like using quantum entanglement. I know you can send data instantly, but how do you get one particle in the future and both in the past? Dude, so you're speaking my language, but I'm dumb. I don't know how you, so I know when I send an email, it sends like electronic pulses through things, but I don't know how that's transmitted to actual data. That's nuts. That's like freaking sci-fi to me. So when I'm talking about sending data attached to like particles through time, dude, I am totally talking out of my ass. So what this has made me realize is that gravity is the key to time travel. Absolutely, and that's exactly what I wanted to hammer into everybody's head that's listening. Gravity is the key to time travel, and a lot of people. And the thing is speed and velocity has always been kind of the mode of thinking for it, and that's because with enough speed, you can negate gravity. So if you can move faster than the speed of light, then you can move backwards in time. But that's because you're negating gravity. You don't have to physically move. You don't have to move anywhere to move faster than the speed of light. If you can eliminate gravity, because, you know, we think zero gravity, we think about like floating around in space, but that's not, there's actually gravity there's still a really strong pull to gravity. It's just you're no longer pulled to the Earth's surface anymore. You're pulled to a generic, you're basically in orbit with the sun at that point in time, because when we get into space and we go into orbit, I don't think you're not flying around the Earth. You are falling faster than the Earth can spin. So what it is your lateral, let me see if I can do this you know what? I've got a pin here. I'm going to show you guys how orbit works and how orbit is calculated, because this is probably really integral to this conversation, and I don't think people really understand how orbit works. Let me get this little piece of paper here. Or do something stupid on there. Here is the Earth, right? And so when we want to orbit around it, we don't just, it's not like NASCAR where you just constantly make a left-hand turn, right? Gravity is always pulling you down towards the Earth. And this is how the moon orbits Earth too, by the way. But say you're in a little spaceship, right? There's your little spaceship and the arrow. Earth is pulling you down. So the goal is you want to launch off the planet and you want to fly straight, like away from it. But you want to move at a speed that's so fast that you pass, by the time the Earth is able to pull you down, you have cleared the Earth. So the Earth is having you pulled down as you're moving laterally. And so when you're in orbit, you are perpetually falling. So you're not in zero gravity, you're constantly in gravity. You are just moving faster laterally than what it can pull you down, so you never hit the ground again. If that makes any freaking sense at all. And that's what our moon is doing. Yes, you need gravity for propulsion, period, no ifs, ands, or buts. And that is one of the first laws of thermodynamics. You cannot create energy from nothing. So if you completely eliminate gravity, you cannot propel yourself. But if you completely eliminate gravity, you are not hindered by speed or movement. Anything that is not hindered by gravity moves at or faster than the speed of light, which would propel you backwards through time, even if you're not relatively moving. So it starts getting crazy. So, and just like that how orbit is actually working, where you're moving laterally so fast as you're like, normally when you move laterally, say you jumped off a box like as far as you could forward, you're gonna arc like that, right? So imagine you could jump so far forward that you cleared the planet and you fell on the other side, but gravity is constantly pulling you. So what's going to happen is you're just going to keep perpetually falling around the planet forever, and that's how you get in orbit. But eventually that orbit's going to decay because gravity is going to always pull you down. So what you're experiencing is zero gravity is not zero gravity. It's the absence of having something to stand on. So there is no such thing as zero gravity. There's always something pulling at you. And if you get closer to the moon than say you jump so far laterally that you clear the Earth, fall all the way around it, and it propels you towards the moon. The closer to the moon you get, you'll enter its gravitational field as well. And so that zero gravity that you hit like 3/4 of the way between the Earth and the moon, that's because gravity's pulling you in two different directions. It's not zero gravity, it's double gravity. It's more gravity. But you're stuck. It's like something being stuck between two magnetic poles. So to travel through time, you have to eliminate gravity, which gravity is everywhere, except the one place gravity is not is the center of the biggest gravitational force on the planet, which is a black hole, or more specifically, a supermassive black hole. So gravity hits quantum mass at the event horizon, or a critical mass at the event horizon. After you pass the event horizon, you get to the center, or like the eye of the storm. You are at the only point in the universe that is theorized to have zero gravity, and that's why black holes are integral to time travel concepts. Same thing with wormholes. Wormholes are generally thought to be two black holes basically connected, where space-time has turned basically into a tunnel instead of like a flat plane. Okay, I got to catch up on some of these comments because I just went total nut job there for a minute. Oh my god, I just hurt my head trying to come up with plausible experiments sending data back in time. Yes, and like I said, I was just going over show notes trying to organize this, and my brain nearly exploded. I had to take some Fiorset just to get through this. We have satellites that do that. I'm not sure what that's necessarily in reference to, but basically to communicate. But I think I do know what you're talking about. Basically, like Hubble and things like that are so far away that we have to navigate that time dilation to sync up and talk to them. Basically, to those satellites, we're stupid now because everything takes so long to get to them, and the satellites are just like tapping their foot waiting for time to catch up. Yeah, because apparently our universe is falling, so even in space it's not zero gravity. It's no different than being in a rapidly descending airplane. Absolutely, except let me blow your mind again. The universe is homogeneous since there's no up, down, left, or right. And people generally think of the universe as kind of a spherical shape, which is a little bit more accurate than what I can explain. But if I took a very low inflated balloon, right, and I drew all the galaxies on it in a circle, and then I blew it up, every single thing on it in all the different places would expand on their own plane as the universe also got bigger. But there's nothing in that middle space, and there's nothing in that outside space, and it makes your brain explode. So a lot of people think of the universe as a ball where there's like a center and an edge, but the thing is it's actually more of a tubular sphere. I don't know how to explain the shape that's in my head, but it's homogeneous. And you can look that up, and then you can, slowly cry yourself to sleep at night knowing that the universe is a homogeneous thing that cannot be directly traversed. That's why we use airplanes to mimic zero gravity. Yeah, it's the fall, and it's exactly the same. And like one of the things about astronauts that have gone into space, if they've never been to space before, and they try to simulate it on Earth before they get there, so maybe not every astronaut, but a lot of astronauts get up there and puke, because the problem is they constantly feel like they're falling, because they are. That feeling you get when you kind of lean back in your chair too quick and you feel like you're about to fall? Imagine having that 24 hours a day while you're in space. They get used to it, but you're constantly in this free fall sort of feeling state until you get used to it, and then that free fall, it becomes relative to your position, and then you kind of desensitize to it. You don't feel like quite as much like you're falling anymore, unless you like look out the window and there's something relative to you. That's why a lot of times they feel better when they're inside the castle. The entire universe is being pulled down to a certain point somewhere. Given this presidency, I would say the 7th level of hell. But actually, yeah, the universe is technically falling. If you think of it in terms of in all directions, right? So if the universe is expanding, think of it as falling in all directions. But a lot of that has to do with the propulsion from the Big Bang, which I don't know. This is a paranormal talk show. There might be some religious people that don't really like the Big Bang, but scientifically that, everything was exploded. So and this is one of the ways that we know this, because the thing is like, talk to a flat earther, they don't believe in gravity, which doesn't work, right? This totally blew my mind when I wrote that article the other day, and kind of started some of this discussion too. But flat earthers don't believe in gravity. They believe we're on a disc that is constantly going up like an elevator, and we're held to the ground because of perpetual motion, right? Which, ironically, has to function using some of Newton's laws. So they're getting really picky about it, but they say gravity isn't a thing. Well, the thing is nothing exists without gravity. Oh my God, you just get into these like really weird YouTube rabbit holes when you start to follow that. And so they think you're doing that. So the thing is if gravity wasn't a thing, everything would just kind of... I'm not even getting into it. I know Sarah really wanted to be in on a flat Earth discussion, so we might have to dedicate a show to that. Gravity hold down stomach acid and food. Imagine trying to hold good in your body without the aid of gravity. And you would probably say you somehow could survive the crushing gravity of traveling through time. If you were in the situation where there was absolutely zero gravity. Here's the deal: with absolute zero gravity, the molecules in your body probably couldn't hold themselves together. Like, you have to think about that. The thing that holds the atoms in your body together, and then the molecules that adhere to the atoms, and the neutrons and electrons, and then you get a little bit, when we're talking about cells and all that, that's all gravity. That's all contained because of microgravitational forces, and you get into these like micro universes, and it becomes so freaking nuts. And when you get into the discussion of trying to move that back and forth through time, it gets a little bit crazy. Oh, we got another comment. I think most Christians that also acknowledge science believe that God caused the Big Bang. Flat earthers are just idiots. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I've run into a lot of people that are super religious, and they think the Earth is only like 2,000 years old, like 20,000 years old, and that the Big Bang is a lie, and dinosaurs were just put here to confuse us, and that gets a little ridiculous. I'm fine if your faith wants to tell you that God created the Big Bang. There's nothing that makes those things not go hand in hand. That's fine, except that you have to explain the existence of God without the existence of a universe, and I don't know. I'm not going to debate those things, but that's fine. I'm fine with the hand-in-hand science and religion stuff, but I have had people like, oh, you can't quote that because, the Big Bang, that's just science lying to us, and it gets really frustrating because I can't have any kind of like intelligent conversation with them. It's like, okay, well, obviously you don't believe in physics or medicine or anything like that. All the principles on which reality works. They have zero gravity tanks, right? Humans have or have not been in them. Like, could they live? No, so as a kid, I always thought if I went to space camp, I would get to be in the zero gravity tank. Zero gravity tank is a swimming pool, or it's an airplane that takes a quick dive. It's simulated zero gravity, but gravity is always a force that is exerted upon by all matter in the universe at all times. unending. So to simulate zero gravity, you either have to slow a fall as much as possible, like a swimming pool, or you have to fall so fast that that the human body falls at the exact same speed as the thing around it, like a plane taking a dive. But it feels like you're floating because you can only see the inside of the plane. It would be exact same as skydiving. Think of it this way: if the plane was taking a dive, right, and you jump up in the plane, then you're kind of like floating in the plane, right? Now take the plane away, and you can see the ground and everything rushing at you. All of a sudden, you're falling, not floating. So it's relative. And I mean, the way the concept of relativity came around to Einstein anyway in these concepts was he was imagining a train, right? A person riding a train and a person observing somebody riding a train. If you're riding on a train and it's going 60 miles an hour, you can walk up and down the train, no problem. It like a normal pace. Your body is also moving 60 miles an hour, 160, whatever speed you want to apply to it, right? You're moving at the same speed as that. So to you, it seems like you're just walking normal, no big deal. You're jumping up and down, and since you're also moving at the same pace, you're jumping like that, right? The person standing on the side that observes you going by just sees you go by as like a flash, right? So to you, time is moving slower. You perceive time as slower. To him, he's perceiving you as faster. So to the molecule, oh God, it's so hard to explain, because like if you also zip by that guy, it would look like he's going 60 miles an hour, but he's stationary, right? So you're oh my God. Y'all are getting me down a rabbit hole. It's so awesome. Right? So to the person on the train, the guy that's standing completely still looks like he's zipping by at a zillion miles an hour, when really you're the one that's moving, but to you, everything on the train is stationary. So it gets totally nuts. So time has to do with perception. Terminal velocity is the term you were looking for. Yes, terminal velocity. That is the maximum speed at which a body can fall. And that can actually be sped up with the absence of forces moving against an object in motion will stay in motion unless an opposite or equal force acts against it. Right, so if you remove the second part of Newton's law, then you can actually move faster than terminal velocity, and that is kind of an experiment you can do where you can drop a bowling ball and a feather at the same time, and the feather is gonna have a lower terminal velocity than that. But if you put the feather in a tube where all the air has been completely sucked out of it, then they both fall at the same rate, and everything falls at the same rate because they have the same amount of gravity acted upon that object with similar and then only mass matters because massive bodies are attractive to each other. I'm not as dumb as I sound, but I am hitting the 2-hour mark, so I hope this was actually an entertaining episode. I really feel like I talked about a lot of stuff but didn't actually get anywhere. But I hope that's just my relative perception of what's going on, because I feel like I'm rambling to you guys. You might have seen me as just talking really fast and saying a lot of interesting things. I don't know. It'd be great to get some positive feedback on this one, since I had to do it solo, since nobody wanted to talk to me about time travel. Probably because I go off on tangents. Like I almost got like the red yarn and a map out to get all that going. But so anyway, those are kind of the basics of time travel. If you take anything away, speed is not the key to time travel. It's going to be gravity. Humans probably cannot move through time unless we can figure out how to make the human body survive massive amounts of gravity or lack of gravity, which a lack of gravity would make all your atoms fly apart. Too much gravity is going to make you condense because the human body is conditioned to Earth's gravity. Unless you manipulate all these things, you can't move forward and backwards physically. But there are observations in nature, and not like your backyard nature, but like in the universe, where we can see time dilation in effect, and things moving forward, which means ultimately things have to be able to move backward at some point, and you don't have to get too deep into quantum mechanics to prove these theories. So even though I probably could not explain it as good as it needs to be explained, and we can always discuss it on a later show too, hopefully it did give you like some things to look up and kind of explore on the internet this weekend. And if you find anything cool, message us back. Post up I want to see more discussions on our board, guys. Like, I had a great time talking with some of you guys about different like theories of relativity and getting into discussions like that. I love seeing that stuff on our website, on the Facebook page, in private messages, emails. I really want to see you guys interact more. I want to answer more of the questions, and like, I would really love if we can continue these the podcast discussions well after the episode ends, So there's all that. So any ideas you guys got, any questions that you think I should clarify on, or anything that you need to correct that I said, because I guarantee I said something like incorrect. Like way incorrect. Way. But just, hit us up. So also our next episode is going to be episode number 40, which is pretty exciting. I think that calls for a celebration, super special episode. I think we're going to talk about skinwalkers for episode 40, which is something that is deeply ingrained into the North Texas, the NTParanormal lore, and all our investigations and everything. And so we're going to get really in depth on that. And we're going to try not to reference Kyle too much that episode. We're going to actually just talk straight skinwalkers. Try to look up a lot of cases. I already started doing the research, and I found one where it was claimed as a legitimate defense in a murder trial. So that should be a really interesting episode. I know Sarah's going to be in on that one. Anyway, I hope you all like the show. If you got any questions, comments, corrections, anything like that, keep it going. If you guys start doing some research, because I lit a fire under your ass about it, and you find something cool, post it up. I want to talk about it, because I'm really passionate about these different topics we do, and I always feel like we do the podcast on it, and then it just kind of goes away, and like, we can always revisit them on later podcasts, but I want to keep it going. I want to keep the discussions going. I want to keep the community active, that sort of thing. And I really appreciate you guys watching the show, listening to me ramble on, putting up with all the stupid jokes and the half-ass explanations, but you guys know we're really passionate about it, and we're really serious about what we do when we get down into it. So thanks everybody for watching. I'll catch you guys next week with Sarah, and should be a good show. Everybody have a great weekend.